Shabbat Shalom. Today I want to address a question that's been at the center of the national conversation this week. And the question is, are people born wicked, or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? That question, of course, is a direct reference to this week's Torah portion, because this week in Parshat Toldot, we begin the saga of Jacob and Esau, the two brothers who were seemingly at odds even before they were born, both struggling in their mother's womb. Esau, the firstborn, is noted as a child for having an unusual color. He's a redhead. He's a hunter, an outdoorsman, a bit of a wild man, whereas Jacob, the younger brother, quieter, an indoor kid. And one day when Esau returns home from a hunting trip, he's so tired and exhausted that he sells his birthright to Jacob in exchange for a pot of stew. And later on, Jacob engages in this massive deception while Esau's away hunting for their father Isaac's favorite meat. Jacob dresses himself up like his hairier older brother, tricking the blind Isaac into giving him the blessing of the firstborn that should have rightly gone to Esau. And when Esau finds out, he promises himself that after Isaac dies and the mourning period for him has ended, he will find and kill his younger brother, leading Jacob to run away into exile. A disinterested, objective reader might make the argument that Esau got dealt a rotten hand, that if anything, he's actually, at least in this week's parsha, the more moral of the two brothers, and that Jacob's trickery is lamentable at best and unjustifiable at worst. But of course, we Jews are not neutral parties in this matter. After all, we are the children of Israel, the descendants of Jacob. And so the rabbis came up with all sorts of explanations for why Jacob is the good guy here. And they do this by making Esau the bad guy, and therefore whatever he got, he had coming to him. So you take, for example, Rashi, the premier medieval Jewish biblical interpreter. He's writing in 11th century France. And he takes the verse from the story about Esau trading his birthright for a bowl of stew, one of the verses in that narrative. And he notes that when Esau is coming back into the family tent, the Hebrew word that describes Esau is ayef, which means tired. But the Torah doesn't explicitly say why Esau was so tired. So Rashi interprets, the reason he's so tired is that he was exhausted from murdering people. Now, to be fair to Rashi, he doesn't pull out this idea that Esau was a murderer out of thin air. It's a citation from an older collection of Midrash, somewhere between the 3rd and 7th century in the land of Israel. And the way that those rabbis justify it is that there's a verse in the book of Jeremiah that includes a prophecy in which the word for tired is near the word for murderer. So therefore, anytime someone is said to be tired, it's possible that there's this connection to murder. And look, this may sound silly to some of you, but this is a very common and legitimate rabbinic technique, interpreting words that they don't fully understand based on the words that are next to them as context. But this is also a classic example of motivated reasoning on Rashi's part. Because there's a lot of times that the word ayef, tired, is in the Bible in contexts that have nothing to do with murder. In fact, in Deuteronomy, the Israelites are described as ayef because they were described as being tired because of wandering through the wilderness. So are all the Israelites supposed to be murderers too? Rashi doesn't stop with accusing Esau of murder. Oh no. In the next verse, when Esau begs to be fed, Rashi says that Esau eats like an animal eats. And then 2 verses later, Rashi accuses him of being an alcoholic. Clearly, there's something bigger going on here that goes beyond just making Esau look worse to make Jacob look better. The reason is that in the genealogical section of the Torah, the begats section of the Torah, it says that Esau is the ancestor of the nation of Edom. And the rabbis of the Talmud believe that the Edomites were the ancestors of the Romans. And the Roman Empire, of course, destroyed the Jewish temple in Jerusalem in the year 70 CE, which is bad enough for the Romans to earn an eternity of enmity from the Jewish people. But that's not all. A few hundred years later, the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity, converted the Roman Empire to Christianity, and spread it throughout the whole world. And so therefore, just like the biblical Yishmael is seen as the ancestor of the Arabs and thus of Muslims, Esau is considered to be the ancestor of Christianity, and therefore, in some way, a harbinger for all the oppressions and crusades and anti-Semitic violence that Jews in Christian lands experienced in the subsequent 2 millennia. In 2019, Malachi Chaim Cohen, who's a professor of history and religion at Duke University, published a book appropriately titled Jacob and Esau, Jewish European History Between Nation and Empire. And in it, he tracked how both Jews and Christians use the metaphor of Jacob and Esau for their own purposes through the centuries, each side casting themselves as descendants of Jacob the Good and the other as descendants of Esau the Wicked. But Professor Cohen also noted a surprising phenomenon. Generally speaking, when relations between Jews and Christians were bad, as they often were in Europe, the Jewish descriptions of Esau were terrible, almost as if the rabbis were competing against each other to come up with worse depictions of Esau's failings. But in those stretches of years when European Jews were in a better situation, and they did exist, when they had more rights and less oppression, then their rabbis' depictions of Esau, the ancestor of Christians, actually were a lot more positive. For example, in the 19th century, when many European Jews were being emancipated and allowed to become full citizens, the German rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch publicly compared this flowering of coexistence with Jacob and Esau's reconciliation at the end of their stories. You can also see this phenomenon when you look at rabbis who lived in the Muslim world. You take Ibn Ezra, one of the great rabbis who lived in Muslim-controlled Spain, did not have a lot of nice things to say about Ishmael. But he had no issue with Christians, so he was able to look at Esau more objectively. For Rashi in Christian France, Ayef meant that Esau was tired from murdering people. But for Ibn Ezra in Muslim Spain, Ayef meant Esau was just tired and hungry like a normal person who had just been out hunting all day. In fact, in the Torah, it's not only that Esau acts like a regular person rather than the murderous maniac that Rashi makes him out to be. It turns out there's a lot about Esau that is commendable and exemplary. The reason that Jacob even has the opportunity to do this blessing switcheroo gambit in the first place is that Esau was out hunting so that he could serve his father his favorite meat, which is a very nice thing for a son to do for a sick father. And Esau's respect for his father, his love for his father, is so great that he says that he will not take revenge on Jacob until after Isaac dies, for fear of causing emotional harm to Isaac, who, let's not forget, knew a thing or two from his own childhood about what can go wrong when family members go after each other with weapons. And most significantly, Esau is the first character in the Torah to ever forgive someone else. In a dramatic scene that we'll read in a couple weeks, Jacob and Esau reunite and kiss each other. And when they part, they do so on good terms. Now, if you want to be pedantic, it's true that Torah never uses the word forgive explicitly to describe Esau's reconciliation with the brother who bamboozled him out of the blessing and the birthright. And indeed, there are some commentators who say that even though the Torah says that Esau kissed his brother Jacob, what actually happened was he was trying to bite him. But even Rashi, who really seems to have hated Esau and called him pretty much every name under the sun, says when interpreting that story that the love that the brothers felt in that moment was real. As the 20th century scholar Nechama Leibovitz writes, for the rabbis living under Roman occupation, Esau, like Pharaoh and Haman, is not an individual, a specific historical figure who appeared at a certain time. But Esau is a prototype, a symbol, a milestone of Jew hatred. A symbol does not contain both good and bad. It's all of one piece. Esau is the symbol of hate. In the Torah, however, Esau is a human being, the son of Isaac and Rebekah. Like all human beings, he has his good side and his bad side. His good side was his respect for his parents, which is emphasized by the text. And Rashi, who was concerned with the plain meaning of scriptures, cannot overlook this creditable side of his, even when Esau was breathing Cain-like vengeance and calling for his brother's blood. So what can we learn from this history of rabbinic interpretation? How can this help us, guide us in our own lives today? I think the first lesson is that the way we read our holy texts are more contingent on our political and social circumstances than we realize. It's unclear to what extent Rashi's arguments about Esau were part of a conscious strategy to get back in some small way at the group that was oppressing him and his people, and to what extent it was an understandable but unfortunate, unconscious reaction to that oppression based on suspicion and unadulterated loathing. It's true, it has to be said, that in every generation there is a Pharaoh that goes beyond symbolism, there is a Haman that goes beyond prototype, there is some group or another that does seek our destruction. But when we apply that label, or for that matter, any allegation of anti-Semitism, we have to ask ourselves first whether we're doing so judiciously, or whether, like Rashi, we are allowing our prejudices to color our analysis. Similarly, when we see major political figures pronouncing entire groups as dangerous, murderous, prone to addiction and animal behavior, the same language used to attack Esau and therefore his descendants, we have to guard ourselves against accepting it unquestioningly. Just as we are called to see Esau as a human being rather than an archetype, we are similarly called to see the humanity of every person, because every person is created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God, and that includes people whose politics or nation of origin or gender identity makes us uncomfortable or scared. And finally, we have to remember that no one is just one thing. People are complicated. Esau probably wasn't as bad as Rashi made him out to be, but also he probably wasn't an angel either. You know what? Neither was Jacob. And neither am I, and neither are you. We're all somewhere in the middle, doing our best. And we would want everyone to give us the benefit of the doubt when they perceive us. But by using reductive labels like evil or crazy or wicked, it makes it harder for us to do that to others, harder for us to see the humanity in others. But just as the story of Jacob and Esau has a happy ending, so too can we find a positive interpretation to guide us. Because pushing ourselves to see the humanity in others, to assume the best, even in those people we fear or don't understand, is a dramatically transformative outlook on life. And while it's not easy to do it consistently, when we do make this philosophy a part of our life, we will have been changed for good. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for joining the Park Avenue Synagogue family. I hope you enjoyed the sermon. Please consider supporting our online community by scanning the QR code or by going to supportpas.org or by making a donation. Shalom and see you in Shul.